Now, hello everyone, welcome back to another Anchore live stream. We've not been here for a couple of weeks because reasons, and a couple of us have been in the same place as each other. Myself and Chris were recently at All Things Open. More on that in a minute. But we do this every week. We are the open source team at Anchore, and the names you can see either side of me. We've got Dan over there, and Will, Chris, Alex, and Keith. Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Excellent. They can all hear me, and I hope Josh, who I see is in the chat, can hear as well. Let me know if not. So we do this most Thursdays. I used to say every Thursday, then we missed one last week. We go through issues and pull requests that we've tagged with needs discussion, and we have a discussion, and anything else that is worth mentioning. So if you want to know more about what everyone does, then head on over to this website here, anchor.com/open source, and you'll find links to everything. If you want to go directly to the source, then I'd go straight to github.com/anchor, and you'll find all the projects. There's a whole load of open source projects. We mostly talk about Syft and Grype here, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff there that's super interesting. And you can try out, and if something doesn't work, let us know, file an issue, and maybe you'll see it discussed here. I wanted to mention, I did say that myself and Chris went to All Things Open in Raleigh earlier this week. It was fantastic. It was great. I wrote a trip report. You'll find it on our discourse. The quick link to that is anchor.com/discourse. And this link here works as well. In fact, I'll just pop this in the chat. That's the easiest thing, isn't it? Oh no, because I can't control copy and paste on a Mac, apparently. Too many days working on a Linux machine. My keyboard is not working. We have a post there for today, a little bit spooky because it's the 31st, and it's all been thrown into disarray because the UK has done daylight savings and the US hasn't yet. So this, for me, is an hour earlier. For you guys, makes no difference. Anything else anyone wants to announce or mention before we dive into whatever it is we're going to dive into? I see no heads nodding, so should we dive in? Right, has anyone got a needs discussion that they want to discuss?
There were two pull requests that someone came to the community meeting last week on Thursday, and we told them, hey, we can't talk about these because we don't have the meeting today, but we would do it first thing next week. They're both from Adam McClagan, who gave us two pull requests on Syft. I posted them in our kind of discussion chat, and I thought we could start by at least looking at those because I promised him we would look at them.
So that would be this one and this one. Which one do you want to go for first?
We can just start with the top one. 3333, I think is the first. 3360 is the top one.
3360. Expose option to scan without indexing. So have you read this and you know this? Do you want to take over?
No, we can take some time to read through it, but the gist of it to our viewers right now is that if you have a very large image, indexing the file tree or just indexing the entire portion of the container takes a long time. It's the bulk of the process of Syft before it goes to discover all the packages. And Adam thought, well, what if we were to add an option where we didn't do this full indexing and match on glob because he knows specifically he's only interested in some portion of the cataloger or one package or a couple packages being lifted out. That's the long and short of it. I think Alex did some review on this pull request recently. Alex, what were your thoughts when you took a look at this as at least being a CLI option or being a config option?
I mean, so and this one was talked about, like doing something like this was talked about before this even came up, this PR showed up. The hesitation is adding a switch, adding something that somebody could turn on where the performance gets way worse underneath some default circumstance. And actually, the vast majority of cases, this is going to be dramatically slower. It's kind of really useful for a power user where they've got a scalpel, they're doing surgery in this one spot, they have like one cataloger turned on, and they're saying, yeah, I know what I'm doing, and I know it's going to be faster because I don't have to index something where in places we're not looking. The big culprit for like the big culprit when doing unindexed searches is like double star globs. It ends up needing to search the entire file system anyway, and every cataloger uses a double star glob, which is why we decided to leave this out. And so if we decide to put this in, my inclination is to make it a power user thing. Like so, in other words, it's not elevated up to the CLI. It's a config option thing. We have some warnings around it, and when it's used, probably even do a log warn saying like this may not be performant unless being used correctly because it's one of the first knobs that we would be adding that like things make it way worse if not used correctly. So I don't think I'm totally against adding it, but like we didn't add it originally because of all these caveats. And so now that we have the PR and there is somebody does have a desire to have it, I just think we need to put, here be jacking signs up is the TLDR. What are other folks' thoughts?
And one thought that occurred to me is that it sounds like it usually hurts performance, but in very specific situations helps performance. Is it possible to guess which situation we're in with any degree of correctness and do the right thing?
Uh, do the right thing. Oh,
So
well,
like instead of giving a knob, like index the right amount for the estimated performance needs all the time, instead of giving people a like do the wrong thing button that they should sometimes press. I don't know if that's possible or easy. It's just I don't I
it's
wanted to
trick.
suggest it.
Yeah, it's tricky because what we're essentially talking about is so it's a dark space and you're using a small flashlight to slowly, see the whole space. And that's like the what the indexing is doing. And so you kind of don't know what you're going to run into until you run into it, either by non-performantly doing it, or that is like doing a double star glob, or non-performantly indexing. You kind of don't know which case you're in until you're in it. So it's hard. It's really, I haven't been able to think through how to do that yet to answer your question.
I mean, I would think it's kind of like you said, Alex. If if you're doing a couple of searches, you're already slower, right? So like maybe if somebody is like explicitly, enabled only one cataloger for some reason, like okay, maybe that's one thing we could say. We don't need to scan, and create an index because we can just, you know, go about running a double star glob there, but like everything else like pretty much ends up being slower, like Alex said.
Yeah. Even on like the per cataloger level, it's like it might not be good enough to know that you how many catalogers you have enabled. Because some catalogers they have one double star glob, some have like four. So it's like you'd have to kind of like hard code which ones have the fewest number. Because that's you can't really tell that through the API how many double stars are in a cataloger. Um, but if we like reviewed the code and like put the warnings bespoke like, then yeah.
Actually, it looks like in the PR that this person is specifically worried about scanning a single file.
Are you looking at the code change?
If
Or...
you look at like this currently when scanning a non-archive file, filesource.go applies a filter function to the directory indexer such that all files other than the file currently being scanned and its parent are ignored. But the problem is if the scanned file's inside a directory with a large number of files for two reasons. So I think this feels to me less like we need a scary config option and more like we need to special case source as a file and not an archive, which is a situation we could probably detect pretty specifically. Right? Like why would we ever index if we just want to know like the current directory and the target file. It's like if source is a file, why build an index? Maybe I'm missing something.
Well, I think I might be misremembering this PR. Let me go review it again.
Am I looking at the wrong one? Like, no,
336.
No, you're looking at the right
3360
one.
or
You're looking at the right
okay.
one.
Well, maybe I'm not. Okay. I don't know. Sorry, there were two linked out at the same time, and one of them is specifically about scanning. Oh, I see. No, I'm talking about the wrong one. Sorry. The two links at the same time about file indexers.
Oh yeah,
Confused me.
sorry for posting both of them. It's the secondary one, and it's literally about, in this case, for OS catalogers, specifically for depackage, exposing the glob matching so that it's not the double star like Alex was talking about, and instead having like relatively sane, conformant, and consistent absolute paths that don't need Syft to index the entire file tree to find them, and it goes straight to those paths as provided by the user, which then uh, gives them a more efficient scan.
So it sounds like for the 3360, which is the more sort of more contentious change. Um, it sounded like the main decision to be made is like, do we expose this as a CLI switch? And it sounds like no, it's always only in the config file or the environment, and you always log .warn if it's on because it's and try to explain when it's slower. Is that the decision we're trying to reach?
That's at least one of them. There was another part of this I was going to bring up after we kind of discussed on that, which was how do we kind of field breaking changes that are coming in? Like if we look at this PR, I have a comment on here where the new source provider signature is changing a bit. And so do we constitute that as a breaking change if people are using Syft as a library and they're importing like new source provider in any way? Because it's not under an internal package. It is something that theoretically, if someone's trying to stitch together a Syft run, they could be using that method.
Well, wait, but you're just saying they're adding the with unindexed on the config. Are you saying that there's a change to something else?
Yeah,
Or
if you go to the very bottom or close to the bottom of the pull request,
I've got it
there's
on
a
the screen.
modification for a new source provider where the signature has changed. So kind of like, how do we as a team field this? Or does this require modification before we go back and say, hey, we saw that you changed the signature. This is potentially breaking since we're 1.0. We want to revisit the design of this and figure out, why we're injecting unindexed here.
That you're absolutely right. That's a breaking change, and we wouldn't do that. Although you could always just add another thing.
yeah, we won't be able to do that, unfortunately. But yeah. Oh, sorry, Keith. When you say another thing, you're just talking about another constructor method function.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
We would just use it. That's the way we would go around it probably.
That makes sense because there's no receiver on the because this is just a constructor. So we just add a new constructor with a different name and a different set of parameters.
Okay, so just to like pop off and kind of sum up the issue. We're okay with this kind of change, but one, we don't want breaking changes in our new source provider, so that would probably need to be removed by one of us or go back with the author and talk about that. And two, we don't want to expose this on the CLI as like surface level surprising thing that some non-power user can do. We want it to only be at the config level. And if it's at the config level and designed in the way that it is, then we can probably land this kind of more specific non-indexing, go direct to the path functionality that this user wants. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is yeah. I mean, this is the one where we would want the here be dragon signs.
The warnings as well, right? Okay.
Yeah, this is actually the one I was talking about. So I misspoke when Will was asking which one we're talking about. So because yeah, this is the one where it's like we're using double stars. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, this is the one where it's like we would need to be clear that you may be your performance may get worse when using this. So we need to have the right signage here.
Yeah. Well, and it
Right.
sounds like it's trading off. Somebody wants to have a lower total, like he wants lower total memory usage in exchange for slower cataloging time, and probably like more random disk reads too, because we have to go back to disk over and over again without the index.
Oh yeah, and that's why I kind of put it in this power user category. Like, he's very clearly wanting that like, time memory, CPU memory like trade off. And I just don't think the common user is going to understand that. Um, and may switch it on thinking it's something else. And we'll get an issue saying this is taking forever. So
Right. Or somebody will think it's a go faster button. Right.
right.
So it's
Also,
always dangerous to build a config switch that says for
and
performance only, because then people turn it on and
why did my scan
complain that
get
it doesn't
slower?
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think with the warning, I wouldn't have much of a problem with it. I think there's already a lot of configs. The only disadvantage with adding a sort of unadvertised config is we end up supporting it for the rest of V1 if it doesn't prove useful. But if it's off by default and not useful, then people won't turn it on. And yeah, I think it's probably okay.
Great.
I don't know if there's extra testing we need to do for it, but I like the loud warning and no CLI switch approach, and the new constructor to avoid breaking the existing signature in case somebody's calling that from a library.
So have we got consensus?
Yeah, we're good. I think we can take the discussion off this one, and I'll make it an action to subtract the CLI surface, make sure config looks good, add the warnings, and then I'll tag someone else from the tool team to say, hey, can we get this in now? Since that's like kind of where we want to go with it. Okay. Great.
Sweet. Thank you.
Sorry for, yep, that was from last week, and we promised him we'd talk about it. So
Yeah.
brought that up.
And then the next one, do we also want to do 3333?
Some I'm less familiar with, but that was because we had the conference earlier in the week and I didn't get the time to look at this one.
Looking through this one, it looks a bit less contentious to me, at least.
Yeah. Was there any, this one doesn't have like needs discussion on it or anything. Was anyone
That was
blowing this up?
that was a failure of me to not label it from last week. Adam had come to our community meeting when the one with like the office hours, and since we were very short staffed, people were on vacation last week. I told him, hey, we'll look at both PRs during the next time we all come together. So this was a commitment from our team, kind of, that I made during that call.
Got it. Okay, so same story. Got it. Okay, so
But yeah, this one is about like don't build a giant index on the file source. And I think that's much less contentious because it's much more likely to be the right thing to do.
yeah, the comment that I put on here, it looks like he's addressed it. I have not re-reviewed this PR, but originally there was like a lot of code duping going on, and if the comments have been heated, then there's not anymore. So I got to go re-review it.
Okay,
So,
then we can just move on to something that someone else had. But great, that's awesome to hear.
Sweet.
one in the chat of Syft 932 about the Conda ecosystem.
So that, I think, came out of a discussion that we had at All Things Open, right? If that was filed this week. Oh, no,
It's actually no. This is our original Conda support thread, and someone to give context to everyone. We were just at the All Things Open conference in Raleigh Monday, Tuesday. We had someone from Amazon come up to us. They had used our tools before. Keith actually responded to the issue, but what's happening is when we scan and find a Conda package, Syft already has some kind of false knowledge about Conda in that it will recognize some of the files in the ecosystem and go, I know what that is. That's PyPy. And then it wrongly labels it as a PyPy package and then moves forward from there. And I'll find the extra issue for that. But I was like, oh, well, there's probably some metadata or some portions of the ecosystem we can key off of to at least let Syft to start labeling it as Conda. That grows larger into this comment from Alex of how do we support the ecosystem officially. Yes, Keith has linked the 3395 issue.
That one. Got it.
Yeah, and actually, I've left this kind of open. I kind of put forth in this comment that it would need to be dealt with, and it could probably be deduped as a post cataloger step. But I have not put forth like the how. So I think it's going to be the same story as what we've done in some other catalogers, which is like we detect a file ownership overlap, and so we make that relationship, but then that's the point where we can say, oh no, this supersedes that package. Like we make those kinds of decisions. But I actually don't know what the right call is. Is it superseding? Is it something else? So but yeah, agreed. Like there's going to be a Venn diagram of lots of overlap. All right, so I put this up so I think, Will, you had added this as needs discussion like last month. We never got to it, and just coincidentally had been looking at this for another reason, and just got some raw thoughts on there and collected a lot of the notes from a previous community meeting. And I think I've answered probably enough questions to get this into ready, but I kind of wanted to run through it first before doing so. So, okay, Conda. Yeah, you can install a lot of things from the Conda ecosystem, mostly Python packages, but also like C projects. There can be a bunch of different things that you'll find that you could catalog that is just not Python. So good news, there is Conda packaging metadata. So at the very last comment at the bottom of this issue, I put a big old comment. And in there's an example JSON that you can kind of like blow up on the screen. It's right below that code block or that like formatted block right there. Yeah, example JSON, that guy. So in this like opt kind of meta directory, like here's an example for PS util that's packaged up with Conda, and so these are one for one for if you do Conda list, which is to list out all the installed packages on your system, you'll get something that looks like this, which is great because right away you're getting like dependency information, you're getting like provenance in terms of like, hey, here's the channel that it came from, you're getting build information, file ownership. So this is enough, I think, to warrant it's Conda gets its own packaging metadata, because we're not going to be able to fit this kind of information into existing packaging metadatas for like Python and other things, because again, it's not just Python. So in my head, it makes sense. Like, oh, okay, Conda is its own thing. I think that probably means that Conda is its own package type, but I think that's also up for debate. It might mean that like we if we can detect it's Python, then we say it's a Python package, but have Conda metadata on the package and not the Python package metadata. See. And I think there's some implications downstream in Grype for all those kinds of decisions. But like Chris, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I think the way to frame this, or to at least in my mind, so I can understand a better distinction here, is if we're talking about supporting Conda and it becomes its own package type for Python, there's another request on the opposite side where we're being asked to support like the UV package installer, the new super fast Rust toolchain for Python. And so would we have, I guess, catalogers? Like we already have the poetry cataloger. It knows how to pull everything from that package manager. UV traditionally is a package manager. Conda to me is more, for lack of a, it's like an ecosystem because yeah, it has some package manager portions about it, but it also has a larger bit of the data tool chain like surrounding it. So do we just square those and call them all siblings of each other and like they just become their own catalogers, or how does Conda specifically different from like a poetry package manager and cataloger or a UV one? A UV cataloger would be right.
I think one of the differences is that UV and poetry are both talking to PyPy and both install Python packages, right? But like Conda has a different backend and a different protocol. And I think I don't really know anything about it. I have sort of a vague impression that it's better for things with really extensive native extensions. It's got like more of a notion of build tools. So I think that's like point one is that like UV, PyPy, UV Poetry, and pip are all using sort of the same backend, or even if they're using a custom repository, they're using the same backend protocol. So that makes them sort of in the same bucket. And they find Python type packages, right? They find a PyPy package. So that's point one in favor of having it be its own thing. Also, in the Perl spec repo, there is a Conda Perl type, which I think is signal that other tools think of Conda as its own package type. So yeah, it does have interesting questions for Grype. Like I don't know, like if we find, like if somebody publishes a package on Conda, I don't know that it has the same vulnerability. Like I don't know where we look up vulnerabilities for that.
Yeah, and I'll second Will what you were saying earlier about the sourcing, and I'll make one extra little. I said something that was a little inaccurate earlier. I said that it's everything that's in that opt conda meta, all those JSON files. Where we're looking at that one example, that's everything you get from conda list. I lied about that. So what really is happening is when you do conda list, you actually get a mix of the things that is installed from PyPy, and you'll see like, oh, the source is PyPy, and you'll see the stuff in that list. It's also from Conda Forge, which is stuff. So this is where it's like it deviates from the way that Will mentioned it from like UV and poetry and whatnot, where it's like it's a packaging manager, all on its own.
On Will's second point, is there an upstream Conda security feed that we don't know about or that exists? I'm doing my best Google foo in a rush right now. And if I do find it, I'll post it onto this link or onto this issue if they maintain it somewhere. Because then, like, yeah, digging back to the discussion where we have to talk around Grype. Yeah, we label this new thing as its new package type. It becomes a Conda package. It's in its own little subspace as far as Syft is concerned. But then when we go to match it, it just hits a big like switch block and goes, oh, I guess we just treat these as PyPy packages and use those upstream vulnerabilities to resolve. And then to Will's point, they have their own package URLs. So do we have to convert Conda package URLs to PyPy package URLs? And is there a direct mirror? Like those actually the same if they exist on the Conda Forge and exist at the PyPy repository as well? Like are those exact package matches that can be ascribed to that vulnerability from the Python namespace? So those are good questions.
Yeah, I agree. Those are things that should be investigated here because to me, the Conda package ecosystem is more like RPMs and Debian, like OS package setups than they are about PyPy and npmjs.org stuff like that. But it might not. It's not a Linux distro, but it's a language agnostic packaging mechanism. But yeah, so like the other questions like. Is there always a one-to-one relationship between the content of a Conda package for, say, a Python program and an upstream release in PyPy? Or is there a mechanism to like backpatch or apply patches so that that software is unique? Right. If it's always one-to-one, then you can do that kind of mapping. Be like, oh, we found a Conda package. It's got Python in it. So from a vulnerability perspective, we're going to do the same Python matching path we always do. But if they can have patches in them, then they're unique pieces of software that we might have to, treat independently. Just like we do with RPMs and DETs and stuff like that.
Yeah. And the short answer is I don't know right now. Like I feel like some of these are one for one, but I mean I think I could probably find some examples where it's not. So I just haven't dug enough yet.
Yeah,
I think most of the open questions are on the Grype side, honestly, and less on the Syft side. And so I have an inclination to allow this to go through in Syft first. And defer the decision in Grype for this. Let the stock matcher handle this initially until we figure the correct matching solution in Grype. That's kind of how I'm feeling to handle this one right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we've sort of had that philosophy of like Syft should make the most accurate SBOM it possibly can, and then downstream tools should figure out how to interpret that SBOM, rather than like having downstream tool concerns go back into Syft. So that makes sense. Yeah, I was just looking. It looks like there's, for example, a PyPy package called Faker for like making fake data, and it's also available in Anaconda. They both list the same GitHub repo as their they both list the same GitHub repo as their like homepage. There is one version available on PyPy that is not available on Conda. And so I think it's just like this person is telling us that they pushed the bytes to Conda and telling us that they pushed the bytes to PyPy. Like I don't think there's any way we can like do like a name for name. This is the same thing.
Yeah,
So it would be super cool if Conda had a vulnerability feed, but
I just did that exact check that you did, Will, for a different package. I did a payload ng, and I just linked it in our chat. So payload ng has the package on the Conda forge right now, and if we push this through the Syft ecosystem, it would get like the Conda PRL, and that's how we would identify it if we just did our own kind of ecosystem development Syft. But then, like this same package name exists over in the GitHub security advisories under the pip ecosystem. So we'd have to do some kind of merging or like, hey, I found this thing. We know we're treating it specifically as a Conda package, but there is the ability for them to be mirrored, like to exist across sources, no matter depending on the developer toolchain that installs it. So we should be doing some matching against the GitHub security advisories under the pip ecosystem just to get a full range of if they don't have their own feed.
yeah. Well, and I think going back to what Dan said, that like it's a little bit like an RPM, right? Because if you're on, you can yum install Python 3 URL lib, right? And then you get a PyPy package inside your RPM, and Grype can consider both when it's matching.
Right.
And so I think this is probably sort of similar in that, like, I don't know, there's like a Conda package that owns the PyPy package, kind of. That might make a lot of dupes, but that seems to be sort of like you got some Python by downloading it from Conda is a hard piece of information to write down in the current data model. But maybe we just only raise a Conda package for now. I think that's what one of the issues linked is specifically saying, like, hey, I installed a thing from Conda, but you make a PyPy Perl. Please make a Conda Perl.
Yeah, and that's because we're finding the wheel and egg metadata and crafting accordingly. But I'm pretty certain if we had our own cataloger for Conda, we would be able to, as long as like the data is there locally, be able to do that.
Alan, I think the stream is showing our Slack, by the way.
Sorry, what?
There we go. Now we're back to normal.
How?
Never mind.
Well,
It's
sorry,
just-
the
it's just on
Zoom
Zoom.
was. I don't think that.
Yeah.
Just the Zoom.
Oh, I didn't know if that went to the stream or not. Yeah, it was just on Zoom. Maybe. Okay. False alarm.
But I think we've kind of reached conclusion on this one. I think we're tell me if I got any pieces of this wrong. We think we have some things to solve on the Grype side. We're probably okay with deferring it. We think that from a Syft point of view, it's probably ready, but we need to still understand the best mechanisms for deduping Python and Conda Forge stuff, which probably could be handled on the PR. I think there's going to be investigation needed there.
Yeah, the only concern, at least, maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but like, let's imagine we built a Conda cataloger right now, And suddenly a bunch of stuff that we have been reporting as Python or whatever else, the cataloger captures a bunch of software. Now they're called conda. Grype might have been actually correctly flagging those prior, and now it wouldn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and this, I think
That's the thing to watch out for. I just want to make sure we don't like eliminate a bunch of true positives for the sake of accuracy before we have a plan. Accuracy in the SBOM
What,
or a plan for matching.
what
it's a good thing to call
what would
out.
Yeah, what would you all think about as a short-term fix or as a short-term mitigation for that? Like if Grype encounters a conda package, it looks in the implementation metadata and decides that it's and it looks in the package metadata and it says like this is Python, and then it will do a GHSA Python search for that name and version. Like because there are some packages published to both. And
we may not even need to do that. So like it could be, so like one thing that we've done for other ecosystems is that we actually don't we don't prune packages from the SBOM. We end up just making a relationship between them saying like, hey, there's an ownership by file overlap. And then Grype gets to reason about deciding to search for matches versus not search for matches in those cases. And so it could be
I
in the
see.
interim, we say like Syft raise up both, do the relationship between those two. We decide to not dedupe them. We just say, I found additional things and there's an overlap. Grype does what it does today, which is just to search
Yeah.
for everything. And it's going to say, oh,
Oh.
Python, still do Python matching. So we would just have all the same nodes, conda, do the stock matching. And then in the future, we would make an enhancement in
Yeah.
Grype saying, oh, we know what to do now with these conda packages, and it decides to like, not search for some.
Yeah, I didn't understand that we weren't deduping in the proposed solution. But yeah, the overlap by ownership. So to be clear, we raise up like what we will do is we will start like emitting a conda package where we find one. And then if that conda package pulled in a Python package that would, because we find like a .egg info or something, we will emit both, but we will say like the conda package owns the PyPy package. Grype will match on the PyPy package, but can tell the relationship is there for future enhancement. And yeah, it might make, and I like that because that's also how we do like RPMs that have language ecosystem packages today. Like if somebody has a gem or a PyPy package or something inside an RPM, that's what we do. So I like keeping it that way. That seems reasonable.
I'm adding that as a comment to the issue, so it's something we know I'm going to preserve. So
yeah, that sounds good.
Which issue are you updating?
932.
Syft 932.
I linked, don't worry, I linked 932 onto the more recent one that we got from All Things Open so that they can fulfill
Oh, it's all right.
there as well.
That was the top one that I yeah. That one, right. So are we coming to a conclusion with comments?
Yep, think so.
Nice. Is that all things Conda done?
Think so.
Does
And
anyone-
Chris, was there anything different from your conversation, All Things Open, about conda? It's just like, please support conda, right?
No, it's more along the lines of you guys are actually identifying the package. Like we are identifying packages in the
Right.
Conda ecosystem right now. We're just giving it the PyPy label. So I think, barring like some of the more complicated, like ascribing file ownership up to that package, which we might be doing correctly already right now. I have to look at the example when you post it. Yeah, we'd be giving Syft knowledge that Conda exists based off the metadata files it finds, rather than just going, I found some Python. It's obviously PyPy. Here you go. And being confidently incorrect about that.
So that user would actually probably be unhappy with our initial conda support, not deduping initially, with the caveat that we don't have a way to match correctly then. So with that extra nuance, like they might be okay with it. So
Yeah, I think with the extra nuance, they'd become okay with it. I'm gonna the ask on the issue that they filed was, hey, give us an example of a container that you have with, content packages in it, and show me where it's already mistaking these as PyPy instead of just dropping them on the floor and not doing anything. Because I think that's the behavior I want to see in the code first, before then going back and reading our comment about how the deduping would work after the fact.
I got one for you. The NVIDIA PyTorch image, man.
Oh
That's got
yeah?
some great overlap.
Okay,
I link it's in that
I'll get
comment in
that
the issue. So
yeah, PyTorch. All right, nice.
Sweet.
yeah, I heard one ask recently to um like, hey, could we accurately describe the dependencies in PyTorch? And kind of came to the conclusion that in order to do that, we would need to be able to reason about Bazel build files. So if anybody ever has an idea, and so shout out to the community, anybody has any great ideas for how to catalog projects that are described with Bazel builds files, that would be great. Please reach out in an issue.
Is that listed in the magical 572, or is that not?
You would think, but it's not. So no, there's no issue for the support Bazel yet. I feel like I don't know how to write that issue.
No, on their build
Is it
system
a-
though, they have a build tools that allows you to parse and implement build files in Golang. So there is already a language spec for breaking out those files and reasoning about them in Go.
Cool.
Okay, so we're 40 minutes
Wow.
in, and we're done with that one, I guess.
Yeah.
You've left a comment, sweet. So there you go, Adam. Promise kept from last week. So are there any other needs discussions that you guys are aware of that you want to jump on? Or is it like pick one?
I don't have anything in particular. Anybody else?
I have nothing on my short list right now.
let's pick one.
I've picked one. I just picked one off the top of the list that was. Has anyone taken a look at this? Have we got any? No, we've got no comments. So this was a formal schema for the Grype output. Yeah, this looks interesting.
Yeah, I added needs discussion to that because it's sort of related to the Grype 1.0 efforts, but it's also, I feel like we're at a point where like Grype has been out long enough and is used by enough people that even if we aren't technically violating Semver, if we rearrange the output, we will inconvenience a lot of wonderful people, and so we should endeavor not to do that and maybe write down what the current schema is.
I don't think we have an issue for, but I believe we've all kind of about this. Was at a community meeting like several months ago saying, yeah, let's just capture a schema for what we have now, and get the ball rolling. But like, yeah, no one's picked up that working. So now this could be the standing issue we didn't write. So okay,
cool.
So I think philosophically we all said yes months ago, but this came in last week. So.
Okay, I didn't realize that we'd said we were sort of capturing the current schema like that.
I should have written the issue. So I just attached this to the 1.0 milestone.
Cool.
If you're watching,
and this is ready to. Can we put a note on here that the plan is to write a JSON schema for what we do today and publish it and then put it in ready? Because I think it is ready. I mean, anybody can do a Grype-o JSON and look at what's there. So
yeah, I'll add a comment now.
Nice.
Great. All right, next.
The other thing too, if you're watching, we're not talking about the database schema for Grype. That one is documented, the V1s through V5s of how it talks to the DB. This is more of the output format of Grype of like what is actually in the JSON document for the results. So I know it gets confusing if you just say the word schema. You trying to figure out what it applies to.
Should we go for this one? This is quite recent. Create SPORs that meet the NTIA minimum field requirements, which
this one Alex and I talked about a bit The gist of this one is there have been some different asks for supplying the information that Syft uses to fill in the top level package. So like the package name, the package version, depending on what you scan, if you scan a container, like Syft has some pretty good information about that and does a great job of filling that out. But if you scan a directory, there's not really anything that it knows to do there. And so you kind of say, okay, well, I'm scanning my project. Here's the name, here's the version. And so there are more asks for, like, there's another issue that's referenced here or linked to in here asking to add the supplier now. And this one is a more general, hey, let me fill out top level package information for, for the thing that I scan in a general sense. And so I kind of, like I said, I talked with Alex about this, I think a day or two ago. And there's a comment down below that has a potential suggestion for what to do there. But that's the gist of what this is. And I guess the trick to me is that, like, kind of what we're doing is letting somebody specify some kind of, hierarchical data. And that's kind of tricky without having a hierarchical data structure, right? So like maybe you could give it like a JSON that we can map to the package or something or other like that, or something else. But I think generally some of the things people won't really know until, when they run it, like the version of the thing. And so like specifying that as a command line arg seems pretty useful.
I like the detail you've put in this comment, Keith. Thank you.
So out of curiosity, do we like it? Do we hate it? Any other ideas? Or need more time to review?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Something that popped as interesting to me in like the original ask was like the order of operations. Like I'd like to be able to create a Syft document and then essentially merge in some information, which is not, it's not exactly the same thing as while I'm generating a Syft document, use this information. I'm not sure it matters, but something tells me this is a use case that's going to matter for compliance purposes, which I think this one is about, right? It's referencing it. Because it's like, well, yep, it does generate a valid formatted SBOM, but for compliance purposes, there's some other stuff that needs to be in there, and like some of it I know, some of it I don't know that I don't know, right? That those conversations we've had in the past. So I'm just thinking about it. It's an interesting one. I think what you guys proposed looks like it would fit the bill for sure.
It sounds like what I mean, like having like something similar on like a convert command or an edit command
Right.
would like fit that bill too. I mean, I hand wave at the edit command. We don't have an edit command today.
Yeah.
But like you can imagine it being on convert and like you're converting to the same format as a a backwards way to do this. But that kind of what we're saying. Like I want to have the same thing in the same format, but just like add this extra stuff. So same flags on that convert command.
Yeah.
Which makes me feel like we would have like an edit command would just be convert, but but you're not actually going to another format. You're just, you're exposing only the other flags to amend information, to add information.
Are each of these fields that he listed for both the top level comment and the document required for the NTI minimum? That feels like so much more than I remember.
They are not all required.
Okay. Okay. I thought, yeah, I was like, this all felt, I can't believe all of this is like, brass tacks baseline to pass a compliance tool that says you have a good SBOM or not.
Yeah, no, the one thing that we're definitely missing is supplier, right? We
Right.
just don't have supplier information for a lot of things. And so like it's clearly not being populated in a lot of what we're generating. And so like that's the one thing that for sure is that. But I don't, most of the other things I think we're basically compliant NTA.
Is it okay to have unknown when we don't know things like the supplier as the value in the field, or is it preferred to actually have the field in there?
I mean, it's definitely preferred to have the field in there. And I mean, and they're asking like, hey, I know who it is. It's us, probably, right? Like we want to tell people
Right.
who the supplier is. But I mean, like strictly from a compliance standpoint, I think, unknown or something along those lines is acceptable, but like we obviously want to do better than that if we can. I guess my one like kind of general question here is like, has anybody seen anything like this in other tools that where you're sort of like on the CLI specifying some sort of hierarchical data that gets put into some thing somewhere? And if so, like maybe linking, examples in this issue would be awesome.
Yeah, I will say like this. That's the part that I feel like the UX part is where I feel like needs the most massaging, the most work. Because I'm with you. Like I don't. You've enumerated out options, and I'm struggling to imagine things that are any better than this. And I come up with a blank. Like, dare I say, oh, just give a JSON patch document. Like, so because nobody wants that.
Or just give a little JSON document, right? Like you could just say like, source, dash dash source info JSON, and like literally put in a string like a JSON document.
Yeah, and that's actually his second option here. It's in that section that's like some other suggestions, and if you click on that and it expands out, you'll see that that one's in there.
Yeah, I like that one. Where it's either the raw JSON itself or a file that is valid JSON that can then be put into it.
That just feels to me like someone's going to have to like escape like company names and organizations that have odd characters in them, and it's just going to be horrific, like pasting it on the command line.
Yeah,
I have
you
a
could
similar
take it from-
feeling.
Yeah.
Sorry,
take it
Will,
from
go
the
ahead.
path too, though, right? Like the like. I was kind of thinking of like dash dash data on curl, right? Where if you do dash dash data dash, you get standard in, and you can pipe in whatever you want. And if you do dash dash data at some path, it'll just read the path and pretend it was there, and it'll handle the escaping for you. And if
Nice.
you do, dash dash data and then like just put in a string literal, that's your data. And then the other thing I've seen, I know for some of the complex inputs on the AWS CLI, you could ask it to print a skeleton JSON of what it's expecting. So you pipe that to a local file and then edit it, put in your company name where it says company name here, and then just do dash dash source metadata at path to that JSON you just made. That wouldn't be horrible. Like, especially because you probably only have to do it once, right? To like get the like, after a while, everybody just has the little like, this is the Syft metadata block for, what product foo.
The one thing I think, like, at least specifically the version is like one thing that kind of falls out of like set it once and forget it.
Yeah.
Most of the
Something
others.
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of like, you probably wouldn't have a document with the version because you just bump it every time. But everything else, I mean, I guess hash, Perl,
Yeah.
CPE. So yeah, I mean, there's things here that I think they would just change every time. Let me have a
Yeah, but
question about
I
this.
wonder
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
if there was like a well document, like if we had a nice little JSON schema for what this like supplier and source info was, then they could at the end of their build process just like dump out the JSON, right? And then we could slurp it up, and that would
Do
be a
they have an
very easy
example?
like
Well, it's a
machine
Syft
talking to a
package.
machine.
It's I mean, it's a Syft package. We have that documented in JSON.
Right.
Oh, it is just a Syft package.
Yeah.
Oh,
I-
okay. Well, then that might be a
Yeah, the scope of it, though, I think will change the solution. The only thing I've seen in the space, and I think it's, well, I don't want to say it's inevitable, but I feel like the discussions might lead this way, are the rule-oriented ones. Because ultimately, if you get to the point where you need to patch elements, some of the elements in the hierarchy are like dynamic.
Right.
Some are generated relative to the setting of another. Right. So it's like basically finding an engine that says, if you see this pattern, apply these deltas and then regenerate the record. Right. That kind of stuff. That allows correcting names and saying like, I always know that this Perl or this named package has a no assertion on supplier. So use this instead. Or this, if you see this package name, it's not right. It needs to change. And then after that, I need you to regenerate the PURL. Like, I think things go in that direction, especially when the list of things is long, like it is in the issue.
I know this is like controversial, but part of me just wants to start treating container sources. And when we like can find the organization name from the image on Docker Hub, that's the supplier. Like I know Node is not technically a supplier. It's like, but it would be Node/Node latest, like package suppliers Node. There you go. We put something in that field so that we can just start having things in there rather than. I don't like that Syft by default, if you run it, you have to ask the user to supply like this corpus of a document to get to something that will make their tool that's checking for an NTI minimum document go green or not, right? Because at the end of the day, yeah, it's just the information is there. It's in the document. It's just so last 0.001% miley that, yeah.
I think though the supplier is a particularly unique one because the supplier isn't even necessarily the originator of the package, right? So like it's taking Node as an example. If I give you an image that's, Node, because I'm the person who gave it to you, I'm the supplier, right? Like who do you call on your support desk to go fix fix a bug and give me an updated patch? You don't necessarily call them, right? And so like the supplier is very, very much like dependent on who's running that and who's like who they're sending the SBOM to.
Yeah, I feel like supplier is difficult to correctly assume. I think there are some spots we could just pull a value from, but I feel like this is one that the user just kind of needs to supply the vast majority of the time. I think whatever we do by default, we're going to guess wrong most of the time, which I think is worse than putting nothing. Even though it's an SBOM minimum requirement, like we need to have it there. It's something
I think it's a good discussion, but it seems to me like this issue specifically is about the top level, right? Which should be something you can specify either as a fairly simple template or command line options.
Yeah.
But if we take the next step down and be able to correct everything else that's missing in the list of artifact, to me that is almost like a second step.
So, and I want to mention this with the UX wise that I'm looking at this list. I'm kind of realizing that we kind of don't want the user to think about structure. So like we said, package JSON schema for Syft package. And I look at this, I'm like, well, do I really want them to think about like a JSON schema for this when in actuality it's really just like a flat list of fields? I actually don't want them to think about structure, and I have to like specify that kind of stuff. It might be that I want to ingest this in JSON as a flat list, where we just do some simple field validation, or maybe I want to be able to slip it up with YAML or something else. But like, but this is really just feeling like name value fields. Like we could even take this from like an env file looking thing, or CLI, or a combination of both. But I think if we were to loosen the restrictions just a little bit to say this is a flat list of stuff, this might get easier. We don't have to be mutually exclusive about these things. We could say many of these paths can be taken at the same time. That's my closing thought on the UX stuff.
No, I'm in favor of anything that simplifies it away from them having to think about a JSON structure to just supplying values for pre-named fields. Okay.
No, yeah, head nod. So head nod. And we've hit that time too.
We have. Are you happy we've got to a conclusion, or does this need further work and prototyping? I don't know.
I'm happy it's Halloween, so yeah, I'm happy.
Okay.
I think it requires more like of us coming back and reading the different, like Keith enumerated a lot of really good options here.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to plant our flag on one of them and say this is the path forward.
I was going to leave a comment with some UX thoughts too, because I want to simmer on it. It's a little longer, but probably async for me.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay. Thank you, chaps. So thank you for watching if you have. And thank you for all those people who've contributed to issues and pull requests that we've talked about today. Without those, we would have nothing to do here. So happy Halloween, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next Thursday. Take care, everyone.
Excellent. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
But go get some candy.
Just try and stop me.